We're all looking for ways to recycle and make things last right about now, and over the last few days I've had good success and a good response to my double-sided scrubbing cloths made with scrubby yarn as a weaving yarn and a plain yarn. This project carries that concept one step farther and makes a soap bag constructed with the scrubby yarn as a weaving yarn in which to insert your old soap scraps. It's no fun trying to hang on to teeny-weeny soap scraps, but inside a scrubby bag, they're really very helpful. If you've seen the other videos, you will recall that we were able to make nearly identical cloths on 3 gauges of machine. This bag will work like that too. I will put instructions for the different gauges on the screen as the movie is playing. I began with 4 inches worth of stitches cast on. So for this yarn and this machine, that's 16. I knitted 24 rows, which should be 4 inches worth of rows, because I want to make a little sack, more or less 4 inches by 4 inches. Not too worried about exactly what it is. Manual weaving, over, under, all the way across. Knit 2 rows and do it coming back. Oops, only one at a time. With manual weaving like this, the weaving yarn is not actually knitted, it is caught in the stitches. Knit 2 rows and do it again. I'm also going to knit 24 rows for this weaving section. Weaving changes the gauge. The two won't align perfectly, but for the purposes of a soap sack, I'm not going to worry about it. We'll just seam them together the best we can and it will be fine. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to run out of the orange background yarn before I finish this, but in the spirit of making do and using every last little bit, when I do, we'll just change to the next odds and ends I have. I am changing colors now, and in case you have not done manual weaving before, we do it with the needles pulled all the way out, pass the yarn loosely but not sloppily over and under the shanks, leave the tail hanging, and knit 1 or more rows. In this case, for this design, 2 rows. So 2 rows have been knitted, over, under, all the way across. Traditionally, we would always weave from the side the carriage was on, but I have found that for small projects, it's okay to do it the opposite direction as long as you don't pull the weaving yarn overly tight. Needles forward just makes the whole process simpler. And almost any machine can do this. Over, under, knit 2 rows for however many rows you need. In this case, we need 24. I've knitted my 24 rows, so I'm going to hang the cast on from the very beginning of the piece and bind off. You don't have to do it this way, you can just bind off, but by doing it this way, I'll have one of my seams completed at the same time as binding off. And now I'll just bind off around the gate pegs. I'll try to keep out of your way, but I do have whole videos on this bind off if you need help with it. Hook to hook, pull back, form a new loop, and make the chain stitch all the way across. At this point, I can either snip my yarn and pull it through and make the seaming of the side a separate project. Either way, we lift the work off of the machine. Or I can go ahead and use the yarn I already have on my hook and start seaming the side with chain stitches. Oops. I will need to use the working yarn, not the tail of the weaving yarn. Silly me. At present, I'm seaming from the wrong side of the fabric, so eventually we'll need to turn the bag right side out, and I've speeded myself up, so don't be overly impressed with my super speedy chain stitches. This is just a sturdy, easy to continue seam, pushing through both layers of the edge of the fabric. Now I'll snip it, pull it through, and since the yarn tail is in the inside, there really is no need to weave it in unless you just want to. So we're all full of soap scraps. You can get fancy and install a zipper right here, but much as I like installed zippers in some ways, I haven't really found that very satisfactory because the zipper tape stays damp. So my preference is to chain stitch it shut with a contrasting yarn on purpose so that it will be easy to find the tail of that yarn and release it later, so that if the soap is exhausted but the cloth is still usable, we can just open it up and put in more soap scraps. In order to access this and release it, I'll have to be able to find this spot. So one thing that you can do is sew a button to the end of this. I have a button, and I have assured myself the needle will pass through it. So I'll bring it up close to my fabric. Now that won't back out on its own, but I can cause it to on purpose. Pull it through the last chain stitch. And you know how chain stitches do. They unravel. So now I could take that all the way out, get back in to add soap, and I'm going to close it back now. You may wish to replace your chain stitching line of thread if you reuse the bag, because it can get a little bit the worse for wear. It doesn't take very much fresh yarn. Let me see if I can get my button sewn back on, and then we'll be good to go.